Yeah, how about that? True story. Want to thank the USGA for providing us with that lovely program, and also let you know that up front on your way out, if you head to your right towards the door to our lounge where the bookstore is and all that stuff, our friends from the USGA Museum and Library have some great artifacts from that year, including a golf club and some other papers and materials that are worth checking out. But before you do that, we've got some really amazing guests to keep the conversation going. So please join me in welcoming from Golf TV, David Marr III, and Raymond Floyd.
What a special film that was. I just want to let you know that there is a little Southampton area tie to that film. You saw the champion would move after that victory there about a decade later to this area. The kid who put the graphics on that film is right here. He's a Quag boy. And the man who did the voiceover, Jack Whitaker, lived in Watermill for quite some time and loved this area. But loved watching you win that tournament there, Raymond. I just want to say before we get too much into the conversation with Raymond, I'm not sure everyone in this room really understands what kind of a competitor Raymond Floyd was. If he put those blue eyes on you and he had that look that you saw a few times in that show, you knew you were playing for second place. 18 years old, he turns professional. His father was the head professional at Fort Bragg Golf Club. 20 years old, he goes out on the PGA Tour. And again, tough competitor. He's out there going up against guys who are scratching and clawing to put food on the table of their kids. Wins at 20 years old in 1963 in Florida. Do you remember who you beat there?
Your dad.
My father. Yeah, that's right. So I've been hungry since 1963 because of this guy. All evidence to the contrary. But
I was taking food away from you.
exactly right. But Raymond forever was the guy you would look at, and if you saw him on the leaderboard, you knew that the people who were trying to take him down had a tough go of it. He won 2 PGA championships, a Masters, and came into this U.S. Open. It seemed like whenever Raymond showed up at a golf tournament, he was focused and ready to win. This one, were you as into the competition driving on Sunrise Highway with the kids in the station wagon, yelling and screaming in your ear as you had been getting prepared for previous U.S. Opens?
It was a different travel.
It was different.
I had just blown the tournament in Westchester, which was the prior week, and I had the lead going to the last round. And unlike the final names in contention at the U.S. Open, very few players near me had much of a record. In fact, Bob Tway ended up winning. But I shot 70.
Everyone hear us well enough? Okay.
I shot 77 to blow, and Bob Tway won. And of course, after the fact, Maria, my first wife and mother of my 3 children, wanted to know, of course, why. And I said, well, it was just one of those things. Well, no, it isn't one of those things. We're going to a U.S. Open. What if it happens again? What if you get in contention on Sunday for that Open? You've got to address what happened. Well, we had a pretty heated argument coming out. And at one point, I pulled over, and one of us was going to get out. I had 3 children crying.
I knew Maria.
But anyway,
it was going to be you getting
yes, it was a different way to address a major championship.
It certainly was. And the championship itself, just so everyone knows, you heard Frank Hannigan talking about it a bit. USGA would give the clubs themselves a lot of responsibility. Shinnecock Hills was a wonderful tournament, a course, fantastic layout, great championship design and test. But again, the membership wasn't here. The overall full membership wasn't here fully in a capacity that could handle that. So the USGA took a lot of the responsibility on themselves. And frankly, at the end of that week, they realized, wait a minute, they're making how much money in the pro shop during tournament week? How much of these concessions? Never again did a golf course after that contract end up doing the merchandising, the concessions, things along those lines. The entire business model changed because of Shinnecock Hills. And frankly, I think the U.S. Open was able to go become what it would become because of that effort. When you take a look at that 1986 as well, it was different out here. The Jitney probably had 4 or 5 stops. The number one song of the year was "We Are the World." There were a couple of different movies that were playing. I'm here in UA Southampton, where I used to go watch UA West Hampton as well. But where was the Hamptons, Southampton? Where was that on your radar screen coming out here? Did you even know about it?
I'd never been here before, out on the island, and of course I'd heard so much from other players how great the golf course was, and just to reflect on this theater, and becoming a resident finally. On Tuesday morning, I played an early practice round, and Top Gun was playing right here. And the family, we came and watched Top Gun in this theater.
I love it. What did that kid think about Top Gun? You have fun watching it, Christina, here in the theater? You remember it? It's the best. Always has been, the community as well. And it was a lot sleepier back then in the day when many of us were living here. But again, coming in, the U.S. Open, you're focused on the competition as well. You talked about that the Thursday round of yours where you didn't quite have your full game. It was difficult conditions, yet the score wasn't terrible. How hard were the conditions on Thursday?
Well, you asked me the question earlier. I wasn't sure when I played earlier or late, but as you could see, conditions were much better in the morning, and I had a late time. And I shot 75, and I only hit 5 greens in regulation. And when you think about that, to have, I never made a double bogey, but to get through that round was survival. And even though I had the 66 at the end to win, the survival of that first round and giving yourself a chance to stay there was imperative.
Now, when you hear hitting 5 greens and shooting the score that he shot, you may think to yourself, wow, that's some play. But this man, probably the greatest wedge player, certainly around the green, dreaming up the shots, maybe of all time. We used to joke that he would chip if he was just on the apron by that much. But you certainly knew how to get up and down when you needed to, put yourself in contention. And again, that leaderboard, as Jack Whitaker said, just pockmarked with people who had won major championships, who would win. You had the 2 guys who were tied with you for 1 point there. Norman and Bob Tway would win the next major championships, the Open Championship for Norman, and then Bob Tway's PGA Championship. When you were in a gunfight like that, they always looked at you like a gunslinger, like you were Clint Eastwood on the golf course. They used that reference a few times. I know you played almost 20 years with him out at Pebble Beach in that tournament. Is there ever anybody you looked at and you thought, wow, I'm a little worried about where that person is or that person? Or did that kind of charge you up a little bit? Raymond Floyd could then go ahead and be Raymond Floyd.
I never really thought about an individual. I was always playing a golf course. And it's medal play that we played. It wasn't match, so it was a different animal. But the thing that's very vivid to me is leaving the 9th green, going to the 10th tee, the scoreboard that was up that we could all see. There were 10 players on that board, and we were all within 1 shot of the leader. And you saw the names up there. Most guys had already won a major championship, and those that hadn't had won usually multiple times on the, as wins. So, and another thing that is vivid is Christina and Maria were standing at the gate leaving the 10th green. And, of course, later she said, "You looked at me, but you didn't see me." Well, I did see her. But then she made a statement about the stare when a media person had asked her. She told him, "I knew he was going to win when he looked at me." And the person asked her, "Well, how did you know?" And she said, "He had the look," which was, that's an athlete in the zone. You watch basketball. When guys get it, they make it from everywhere. Well, I was in the zone. Sure, I saw her, but I was doing my thing. And she said to the person, she said, or he asked the question, I forget how it went, but the bottom line was he asked her in some sense, and she said, I've never seen him lose with it, but I've seen him win without it. But she said, I knew he was going to win because he had the look.
You should never take issue with your interview subject, but not every athlete in the zone has that look. You'll see it if you go outside and look at that picture outside. It's whenever you saw that again, you were in trouble. And I've wanted to ask this question for a long time. It's not golf related, but it is stare related. Christina, did you ever get that stare at home? What was that like? Chilling, yeah. Oh God, she says. That's all she needs to say. Oh God, yeah. You had some problems at that point. Raymond, so the week is progressing. Greg Norman is doing what Greg Norman does, and frankly, you can tell how old that video was right there because people were cheering for Greg Norman. So you see that 9 people tied for the lead, going after it. Again, you're not looking for any individual person, but when did your juices really get flowing as far as knowing you could win a championship, one you wanted for so long, one on your major career that hadn't quite been fulfilled, but you had many guys shooting at you?
Well, you try not to reflect back, but I do remember well, especially the film brought it back to me, was when I birdied the 16th, which was the 70th hole. The scoreboard that I could see there put me 2 ahead because I forget what player just made a bogey, maybe Tway and I was playing with Payne. But that put me 2 in the lead, and of course with Lanny and Chip in the clubhouse, and they were in 4 or 5 holes back when they finished, so I had to play golf to get in. And I felt like 17, the wind was from the more south and east, and that's a really hard shot for me. I prefer going left to right over right to left, but the wind coming across, you need to draw the ball to hold it, especially onto that green. And I hit a 5-iron in there, just turned it in perfectly and put it right in the middle of the green. And that was the point in my mind that I slipped just for a little bit. But I said that shot won me the tournament. And then, of course, hitting the perfect drive at 18 and putting the 4-iron in the middle of the green. And it was a fun walk.
Just as someone who has played that course as many times as I have, that was the year that Lee Trevino, when he was playing the 12th hole, playing a practice round, he went up to the tee box at number 12. Some members were there, and they said, "You're about to play the longest par 4 on Long Island." He said, "Really? I just finished the shortest par 5 in golf, which was the par 3 12th." He made 2 there. Tell us about that on Sunday.
Well, I'd hit a good shot, as you saw, pretty much up behind the hole, and was able to make it. But when you have a week like that, you do everything pretty well. You can see how many putts I made. The long putt that I made at the 7th hole on, I think that was on either Friday or Saturday, from the front left of that green all the way back. You do things like that to win.
You really
and
do.
Holing at the bunker at the 15th on Saturday was huge because I had driven in the right rough. And the way the wind was blowing, even if I had a good enough lie that I could have hit the ball onto the green, but there was no way to hold the green. The green's being firm, and I was downwind. And I played the shot into the bunker on purpose because the pin was right up under the front right bunker, and then I hold it. But that's the way things happen when you're going well.
And I've got to say, I've got to be honest here, even with him right here, as we're watching the tournament unfold, I was doing graphics for ABC Sports back in the commentary area, back in the production area. And to have 9 players tied at a U.S. Open, it was mayhem. One of them being the aw shucks, everyone loves him, Ben Crenshaw. He kind of was tugging at my heartstrings to a bit until that cool customer, I don't know if you caught it in the video because we had the caddy blocking his face. He either makes a putt, he chips in or whatever, and as he's walking, we caught him in slow motion, winking over at his caddy. I'm thinking, dude is tied with 9 other guys trying to win this tournament, and he's winking at the caddy. Do you remember that wink?
that was when I hit the 4-iron into the middle of the green at 18.
We're done.
I looked at him and I said, "It's over, brother."
That's when you got to fall in love with Raymond Floyd. Okay, Raymond, so you're done then. I saw he still had the look as he's walking up to scoring because it's not over until you get all those boxes right. You sign your name, and then you're a U.S. Open champion. As you go down to that 18th green, as the trophy ceremony is about to begin, what were the feelings for you accomplishing the national championship?
I don't even remember those things. I remember holding Christina, and Maria was next to me, and they cut her out of the photo on the cover, but I really don't remember. I know that you saw I got a little bit emotional there. But from that point through the press conference, wow, I just didn't remember too much of that part because we ended up spending the night when we were planning on leaving before. But and then one of the major, I think it was one of the major morning shows, came out and interviewed me on the porch at the club. But I've lost all thought of that other stuff.
Well, I do love that you stayed an extra night that week. It's the Southampton. You will stay longer. We'll get into that in just one moment. But, you know, when you take a look at this picture, again, the wonderful family moments that you had, you had accomplished what you'd accomplished. You said in the video that you didn't know whether you'd ever do it again. Well, he would do it again. He'd become the first player ever to win on the PGA Tour and Champions Tour in the same year. Almost became the first player to win multiple times on both tours that year, except for a playoff on the PGA Tour. So your career wasn't over by any stretch of the imagination, nor was your love affair with Southampton. You got your first taste, not just of the U.S. Open victory and of the trophy, but also of Southampton. How did the place feel to you that week when you were focused on that Grand Dame, as Whitaker called it?
Well, I had played an early practice round again on Monday, and we drove around, and never being out here, and we really fell in love with it. And we talked about it all the time. I had good friends that were, the Phipps family was dear friends, and we would talk to them, and they introduced us to Bill and Donna Aquavella. And then in the 95 Open, coming back out, we stayed with Bill and Donna, and we looked around again and decided we wanted to come out here. And we looked at property during that tournament and ended up buying and moving in 1996, I think. Yeah, September of 96.
How did that work out for the family?
It worked great. You know, we loved it here, every minute of it. Kids loved it. Maria really liked it. So it worked very well.
Fit right into the community, into the golf club as well, into this theater, clearly from Top Gun, and I'm sure a bunch more movies, not just Top Gun. We would all come in from as far as we had to come to this theater to get the experience. We do have a microphone if other folks would like to ask some questions. I can go forever, but I've spoken to Raymond my entire life, it feels like, ever since, again, he beat Dad back in '63. But in any case, any questions anyone has for Raymond, I'll just throw a hand up in the air so I'll see you. Here, we've got one right up front, or I can just give you my microphone. We've got one coming in here. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us a little about the caddy and how long you kept him? And did he read the greens or did you?
No, I always read my own greens, but I had my caddy. I would always want his opinion. I'd want him to read the green while I was reading it. But if I didn't ask him anything, he was not to say a word. And the caddy that caddied for me there only caddied for me 3 or 4 weeks, but he was still a very good caddy.
He's liking that paycheck for 3 or 4 weeks, I'll tell you that right now. Other questions for Raymond Floyd? Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Floyd, thank you for this. I always thought your book, The Elements of Scoring, was one of the best books for an amateur golfer, and I'm wondering if you could share a few of your thoughts or summarize your thoughts for the rest of us who plug away.
Well, everybody's always, when you're playing well and in the limelight, they're always after you to write books. And I said, no, I don't write books. I'm not a instructor, so I don't write books. And finally, of course, my management company, and there's pretty good money in that stuff. So I said, okay, I'll write a book, but I want to do it on the mental side of golf, because that's the thing that I know and what makes a difference in the game. And that's how I ended up writing The Elements of Scoring.
Before we get any other questions, that U.S. Open wasn't the first time that Raymond Floyd came up against Lee Trevino. Do we want to talk about that? It's a great story, man.
Well, I'm going to condense it because
Okay.
it takes
It
a
does
while.
take a while.
But 1965, I went on tour in '63, as Dave said, and I just won the St. Paul Open, and I was living in Dallas, Texas. And I was flying back from St. Paul with a player, a tour player who lived in Dallas, and we were sitting next to each other on the plane. And he said, "What are you going to do while you're home?" And, you know, we were home for a week before the next tournament. And I said, well, you know, I'll play a little golf, but I'm not going to play early in the week. And he said, "You know, you're playing well. You ought to come over to Tennyson Park." He said, "There's some really good money games over there." And I said, "Well, David, I'm not going to go somewhere and play against people I don't know." He said, "I know everybody there. That's where I grew up." So we go over on Wednesday and get in a pretty decent golf game. David got me in, and I lose a little money to the deal, and go back the next day and bet a little bit more than we bet the day before.
Which is why he lost the first day, just in case you're not paying attention.
And I won that day. And there was this elderly gentleman that had followed both days, stayed in the background, had a proper little straw hat on. And he came up to me after the second day, and he said, "I'd like to introduce myself." And I said, "I'm Ray Floyd." And he said, "My name is Ty Thomas." And I did a double take, and I said, "Titanic Thompson?" He said, "How did you know that name?" I said, "Well, Mr. Thompson, you're a legend."
Legend.
Well, he was a legendary gambler of all sorts. And he could play golf equally right or left as well. But he was, you know, up in age. And he said, "Have you ever heard of that little Mexican boy from around here that Lee Trevino?" And I said, "No, I never heard of him." And he said, "Well, would you play him for some good money? There's a guy that'll back him for quite a bit of money." And I said, "Mr. Thompson, if I've never heard of anybody, I'll play him for anything." And he said, "Well, he's just left Dallas. He's down in El Paso, Texas. He's a golf pro down there." He said, "Would you go down there?" And I kind of gave the same cocky answer. "If I hadn't heard of him, I'll play him anywhere." Well, we end up going down there, and we drive up in a rental car after three of us went together. Drive up in front of the club. Little jovial, heavy-set Mexican comes out, takes the clubs out of the trunk, never stops talking. Well, this is Lee. He was the golf professional. He was the locker room attendant. He was the card attendant. He was literally everything at this club. And I went out and it was later in the day, and I played 9 holes. And Ace, the guy that I can't remember his last name, but his first name was Ace. And Ty said, is that enough? Will you play him tomorrow? And I said, "Sure, I'm ready. I've seen the golf course." And we go out, and we bet a medal play, a full walk-in. It's just the bet's not over. There's no pressing until you finish. And I come to the 18th hole. I shoot 65, and He beats me by 2. He shot 63. I said, let's go an emergency 9. And back when you used to gamble for some decent money, we always had a thing, I guess you would call it. But if you wanted to go emergency, usually it was respected, and you could go try to get even in the emergency 9. He said, man, I'd love to, but I got so many things to do. You know, I'm not just
Clubs
the
to
golf
shine.
pro. And it was right. So, okay. So we come back the next day. I finish. I shoot 64. He shoots 63 again. Same thing, emergency 9. We went through that. No, we go back to the hotel. And in those days, I think it was a Howard Johnson. There weren't too many hotels or motels. And we had 3 rooms, and Titanic was in the middle, and they all adjoined. And we met in the middle room, and they had gotten together after we got back to the hotel. And they said, well, Raymond can't beat Lee here. We see if he'll take him over to the El Paso Country Club. So we go in the middle room, and they said, hey, we don't think you can beat him on that golf course. Would you go over and play him at the El Paso Country Club? I said, are you kidding? I've never played the El Paso Country Club. But I'm getting to know this golf course a lot better playing it. So I'm going to play him again tomorrow. And they said, well, we can't bet on you. And I said, no problem. But I'm going to go back and double down. Well, we had been playing $1,000 a piece. And in 1965, that was a lot of money. And so I was out $2,000 and went back the next day, and I bet the $2,000. And it's as vivid to me as that finish right there. But coming to the 18th hole, we're dead even, and it's a par 5, and I was quite a lot longer than Lee, and he had to hit first, and he hit it, looked to me like it was pin high to the right of the pin, maybe 25 feet or so. And I hit my second shot, and I'm to the right of the pin, but just below him, maybe 3.5, 4 feet, and I'm probably in the 20, 21, or 2-foot range. And it's a par 5, so we're on in 2. And Lee hits a putt, and I know most people in here are golfers, and when you're playing with people, and you can be on the side or off on an angle, and when you see a putt rolling, you kind of know, wow, that looks like it's going in. Well, as soon as he hit this putt, and it was a right to left breaker, I just knew the putt was in. And to this day, I don't know how the putt did not go in. It went and it lipped the hole. It didn't do the full 380, but it almost, and sat on the lip. And to this day, I don't know why, even sitting there, it didn't fall in. But anyway, it didn't. And I get over my putt, and I hit a hell of a good putt and hit it right in the middle of the hole. And we went over and shook hands, and it was the first time that I had ever used a foreign language. I said adios. But I shot 63, and he shot 64. So that was my introduction to Lee Trevino. And that was 65, and then he won the Open at Baltus Royal, a couple years later?
3,
Yeah.
In case you haven't heard Lee tell that story, he finishes it after day 2, just so you know. He never talks about going back for that 3rd day.
Yeah.
As your kids grew here in this community, and as you became more closely tied to Shinnecock Hills, the U.S. Open victory and all that, and now looking back, what does Southampton mean to you?
Well, it was another home. It was our second home, and we loved it, and still there's a great affinity, even though I sold my house, but Christina and her family are here, and I love to come back every year and see them and be around and have lunch at the club or go to the beach club or go to the shops in town. It's still a very special place.
Well, and always word goes around when Raymond's back at Shinnecock Hills, and people know when you're there. Never blasting Christine out of this community. I know that for sure. Any more questions? Just a final few. Oh, we got a bunch. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Kinney, and I was the photographer in the 86. And yes, and it there were two knockdown 8-iron
Well, that shot was, I recall, it was 122 yards, but the wind was directly against. And that pin being in the front, I knew if I got the ball up in the air, like I could have gotten a 9-iron there. But if I get it up in the air and hit it where it ended up, it might spin back in the bunker. So I wanted to control the flight and hit it down. And as you saw, I think I was, 8 feet or so behind the hole. So I played a really good shot into there. Yeah, it was. It was just a regular 4-iron. The wind obviously was right to left, and that was the wind I loved because I could just cut it and hold it. So hit it right in the middle of the green. That wind was my easy win. The left to right wind was my difficult throughout my whole career.
That is a stock 4-iron into 18. It's third shot for me typically, but second for Raymond that week. And just to understand Raymond's understanding as far as the game is concerned, Greg Norman hits that shot, same shot that Raymond had hit at 16 in 1995, and Greg Norman wins the U.S. Open over, or has a much better shot. He ended up bringing it back, just what Raymond knew not to do. And quick story, 1991, 50-year-old Raymond Floyd. You never put a 50-year-old on a Ryder Cup team, but Dave Stockton said, look, I need to have this guy who's a killer as far as being a Ryder Cup player is concerned, but also not just knows the competitive nature of the game, has the respect of all the players, including this one kid who hits it a mile from Seattle. Fred Couples is going to play the best he can play if Raymond Floyd's on that team. So as a captain selection, Dave Stockton chose you because of that mind that he had, the one that he used at number 16 to make sure that knockdown stayed under the wind and stayed close to the hole. Any more questions, or are we out of time? Or here we go. Yes, ma'am.
After you won the U.S. Open, did you continue golfing? And, what did you do?
After you won the U.S. Open in '86, did you continue golfing, and what'd you do?
Yeah, I played competitive golf until I was 63 years old, counting the senior tour. So I continued on.
He won a couple more tournaments on the PGA Tour, 4 majors on the PGA Tour Champions, they call it now, senior tour. So he still gave that look to a bunch of guys. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
How are you guys doing? So, in relation to the PGA Championship and the Masters, the U.S. Open wasn't really your specialty in relation to the other two events. Was there something particularly about this U.S. Open being at Shinny, or was there a different mentality you had coming into this one versus kind of the other two major championships in your past?
Well, the U.S. Open is considered the ultimate as an American championship, I think. I know some players will say the Masters, but there's so many foreign players that get in the Masters. But the U.S. Open is our country's ultimate. And but I had always had an issue with the USGA, the way they set up golf courses. And when I went home after the Monday morning round, Maria said to me, "How do you like the golf course?" And my quote was, "This golf course is so good, they can't F it up."
Well, they did a few years later, but not that year. And I'll say it's interesting because maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but there was a town hall, Shinnecock members, with the USGA, and they came back and actually USGA apologized for the setup of the previous 2 U.S. Opens. Not 86, not 95. 95 had great different wind directions from 4 different angles. throughout the week, so it was a wonderful test. But 04 and 18, it was Shinnecock was not Shinnecock, and they said, we want to go to golf courses that can host a national championship tomorrow. Maybe tighten up the greens, don't have to bring in the fairways and trick it up and USGA it. If it's not a championship venue when the members are playing it, then it shouldn't probably be in the U.S. Open rotation. Shinnecock is that, and this year, being 2026, we're going to play it that way. The fairways are going to be wider than you might expect, seeing a Shinnecock Hills Golf Club, seeing a U.S. Open for sure. But when that breeze kicks up, as we all know that it can, it's going to be harder to hold those fairways. So Shinnecock, you're right, this year they're not going to get in their own way again and maybe take care of it like they did in 95 and back in 86 when Raymond won. So any more questions?
Bob
So
had
one
a
over here.
question here.
Yeah, Raymond, we talked a little bit about this out in Florida when we played a winter ago, and I'm impressed with the fact that probably very few people know this, but Raymond had won 2 majors with 2 different backswings, and we talked about it. And I'm just wondering, I know you made that change, flattened out a little more because you had an injury in the right shoulder. Was that injury, did that take place prior to the 86 Open? And the other part of the question is, what kind of an influence did your father have in your fundamentals and sending you out on the tour at such an early age?
Well, I'll start with my father, the influence. He was a golf professional, and he was my only teacher until I had been on the tour for, let's see, well, it was through 1972 when I met, through 1970, and I started going to Jack Grout, who had taught Jack Nicklaus to play. But my dad was my only teacher, but he was a stickler on fundamentals, which I am as well. And I learned from him that we think every flaw in the golf swing is a fundamental issue. There's some fundamental that causes certain problems. The second question is, I flattened my swing out because of an injury to a shoulder. And you're speaking 1969, I won the PGA Championship. And if you see a film of that against this, it looks like 2 different players. I had a very classic full golf swing then, but you had to learn to stay competitive. I had to figure out another way to play golf. And Jack Grout helped me a little bit with that, getting flatter and letting the elbow up. I lost power with the flatter swing, but getting the elbow up let me have a little more leverage to keep the head speed.
I apologize. My eyesight is not what it should be, and I'm getting lights in here. But was that Bob Joyce?
Yeah.
Bob, legend in the Southampton golf community. Round of applause, please, for a long time. Southampton Golf Club, head professional, and just one of the best people in our game, Bob Joyce. Great to see you here, sir. Thanks. A question over on this side, please.
What is your favorite golf course that you've played in your career?
Championship, there's no doubt that this is number 1. And I've said many, many times, your world-class players, there's not one of them will take it out of your top 4 or 5. And that's anybody. But the other question, if I only had 1 round of golf left to play in my life, I would certainly want to play the Augusta National, just because of the ambiance and the beauty there.
You might say Raymond Floyd knows his audience. That's why he answered that way. No. He gives you the honest answer every single. You better make sure you want the honest answer when you ask him a question, because it's coming. Any more questions from you folks who've turned out in support tonight? Yes, sir.
Heard it said that in the first round of Thursday, wind and rain were so tough that no one hit the ninth green 2 shots. Is that true?
Yes, I heard that after the fact, but that was a fact. Not 1 ball was on the 9th green in regulation. And of course, 10, I would think that very many got on to 10 either.
And as a matter of fact, 10, it was the only time in competition that Jack Nicklaus lost a golf ball. Now, he's hit golf balls out of bounds and hit them in water hazards or now penalty areas, but had never actually lost a golf ball. Part of it is because, such a good ball striker. The other part is because he had 1 billion people watching him. I mean, they were all around him. But right side of number 10 in 1986 on Thursday was not a place you wanted to be, and Jack certainly found that out. I guess we have time maybe for one more question, 2 more questions or so. Far left. Your left, my left. Oh, all the way back up in the back. There we go. Gonna get a workout there with that mic.
Just one final question. You made the comment that 86 and 95, Shinnecock was Shinnecock, and that in 26, it's going to be Shinnecock again. Mr. Floyd, any predictions as to what the winning score is going to be?
It's all predicated on the weather.
Entirely.
And here it can be like it's been the last 3 days, or it can be June and coming sideways like we saw on that Thursday. It's very, if the weather gets bad and it gets windy, the golf scores will be much higher than if. And of course now the players with their link, the golf course, like I was the only person under par. I think the golf course will hold its own with an eight or so under par if the weather is normal Shinnecock. If it really gets inclement, it might be a little higher score, or if it's perfect and it happens to rain the week before, that's what you don't want. If you want the golf course hard and fast. But if it rains and then you have a decent week, they'll shoot record scores here.
Can I just make one more comment? I spent a couple of rounds during the rain in the pump house with you at Shinnecock. My brother, Peter Smith, was superintendent for 86 and 95, and I was one of his assistants back then. And our father was superintendent. He was the first full-time superintendent at Shinnecock Hills.
Well, congratulations, because I remember Peter very well. And, when I first came and became a member, Peter was still the superintendent. So I remember Peter, and congratulations to your family. And again, to the indigenous people here that built the golf course and maintained it for that many years. My hat's off.
Absolutely so. The Smith family in particular. Speaking of family, it was 40 years ago this month when Shinnecock Hills peeked its head out to try and show folks what maybe this founding 5 club could be as far as the championship test was concerned. It was pretty much of a secret before then, frankly. But the golf club, this community showed what we were all about, and that sleepy little hamlet of Southampton, the town that is Southampton, all the villages around, including mine and Quogue. It's different now than it was 40 years ago, but that was the beginning of people really understanding what East End golf was all about, National Golf Club, Southampton Golf Club as well, the newer ones then as well. But maybe more important than that, coming into that week in a station wagon full of kids and a wife who wanted to know why he blew the previous tournament, Raymond Floyd came to town, a man who's always known the finer things in life, always had a keen eye for what was good and what was not, saw Southampton for what it was, saw this area for what it was, a great place to have your kids, raise your kids, and have them become fine young people as the Floyd children have. So it was a wonderful week 40 years ago that created so many things that still last in this community. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks for the Southampton Playhouse for having this be such a special evening. And if I'm around, I'm coming out tomorrow to see what we're doing tomorrow. So thanks so much to all of you and to Raymond Floyd.
Thank you, David, and thank you very much.